Heidi, Chapter 1. It was a sunny June morning in the Swiss Alps. A young girl was walking up the mountain with a 5-year-old child. The young girl was Dete, and the child was her sister's daughter, Heidi. They were going to Alm Uncle's cottage, who was Heidi's grandfather. After a long climb, they reached his cottage. Alm Uncle was sitting outside smoking his pipe. "Hello, grandfather," greeted Heidi. Alm Uncle looked up, puzzled. "What's that?" At once Dete rattled off. "I have brought you your son Tobias and Adelaide's child. She will stay here from now on. I cannot look after her any longer." Before Alm Uncle could say anything, Dete ran down the mountain slope. So Heidi was left alone with her grandfather, who looked at her carefully and said, "So, what would you like to do now?" "I want to see what the cottage is like from inside," replied Heidi. Grandfather's cottage was small but cozy. The cottage had only one room. There was a big fireplace, a table, a chair, a cupboard, and a bed. A short ladder stood in one corner. Heidi climbed up the ladder and found herself in the hay loft. A little round window was there, from which the sky could be seen. "I will sleep here, grandfather. It's so pretty here," said Heidi happily. So grandfather fetched her some fresh hay and a little sack which made a lovely coverlet. Heidi slept soundly all. Chapter 2. Early next morning Heidi was awakened by the sound of a whistle. It was Peter, the goatherd, who had come to take grandfather's 2 goats up the mountain to graze. "Grandfather, can I go with Peter too?" asked Heidi. Grandfather agreed and packed her some bread and cheese. All the way up the mountain Heidi ran about gathering colorful flowers. Poor Peter had a hard time looking after her and the goats that kept running here and there. Everything was beautiful up on the mountain: the sunlight, the fresh air, and the mountain flowers. Heidi was delighted. At noon she shared her lunch with Peter as they ate. Peter told Heidi everything about the goats. Chapter 3. Heidi went up the mountain with Peter and the goats every morning for the whole summer. She became strong, healthy, and brown from the sun. Days passed in happiness. Then came winter. Now Peter could not take the goats for grazing, as the mountains were covered in snow. One evening Peter came for supper. "Heidi, grandmother wants to meet you," said Peter. So the next morning grandfather wrapped up Heidi in a thick sack and took her down to Peter's house in a sleigh. Heidi opened the door of the old tumble-down cottage and saw an old woman sitting in the corner and spinning. "Good day, grandmother. I have come." Are you Heidi?" asked the old woman. Peter's grandmother and his mother Brigitta were surprised to hear that Alm Uncle had brought Heidi to their house. This was because he seldom talked to anyone, and people were afraid of him. Heidi's talks amused grandmother beyond measure. When Heidi learned that grandmother was blind, she was very upset. "If you come to me every day, dear, I will be comforted." "You have been a source of joy," said the old lady. "I will come," said Heidi assuringly. That winter grandfather came down to the goatherd's cottage almost every day with Heidi. He also mended the roof and windows of the ramshackle cottage. The cottage no longer creaked when strong winds blew. Grandmother and Brigitta were very grateful. Chapter 4. 2 more years passed happily. Heidi was now 8 years old. One morning Dete arrived wearing feathered hat and a long trailing skirt. "I have come to take Heidi to Frankfurt. She'll be a companion to a rich, invalid child there," she said. "She will not go anywhere," said grandfather. "Heidi is my sister's child, and I am responsible for her well-being," screamed Dete. "If you don't let her go, I will go to the court." "Go away and do not come back," shouted grandfather, and stormed out of the cottage. Dete quickly bundled Heidi's clothes. "I'm not coming," said Heidi. "Don't be silly. You can come back any time you want," said Dete. Then, catching hold of the child's hands, she rushed down the mountain. Chapter 5. In Frankfurt, 12-year-old Clara was waiting impatiently for the arrival of her new companion. When Dete arrived with Heidi, Fräulein Rottenmeier, the housekeeper, however, was not very happy. "How old are you?" she asked with a frown. "I'm 8," replied Heidi. "What?" cried the housekeeper. "We needed a companion for Clara who could study with her and give her proper company." But before she could say anything more, Dete quickly left the house. However, Clara took an immediate liking to Heidi. Soon they became good friends. Chapter 6. The next morning, when Heidi opened the windows to see the country outside, all she saw were brick houses and streets. Heidi was sad. Then Sebastian, the servant, told her that she could see far off things from the top of the church tower. Heidi managed to climb the church tower, but saw nothing except roofs and chimneys. As Heidi came down, disappointed, the caretaker of the church gave her 2 kittens. "Are these for me?" she asked, delighted. The old caretaker nodded smilingly. Heidi carefully placed the kittens in the pockets of her dress and ran home pleased. Clara was delighted to see the kittens, but Fräulein Rottenmeier ran out of the room. Chapter 7. As the days passed by, Heidi grew sad. She missed her home on the mountains. One day, Clara's father, Herr Sesemann, left for Paris. Soon after, there was a letter from his mother, Frau Sesemann, announcing her arrival. There was a lot of excitement in the house. Heidi, too, eagerly awaited her visit. "Call me Grandma," Frau Sesemann told Heidi the very day she arrived. Heidi liked Grandma immediately. She had beautiful white hair and a kind way about her. Grandma taught Heidi to read, write, to pray to God. She also gave her a beautiful picture book as a present. "Always trust God and pray to Him. Tell Him all your problems and He will make everything right," Grandma assured Heidi. Soon grandmother went away. Heidi was sad once again. She often remembered grandfather and her life on the mountains. Often at night she wept silently into her pillow. Heidi also missed grandmother and Peter. Each time she saw the stony streets of the city, she missed the air and the fir trees, the mountain flowers, and the valley. However, as Fräulein Rottenmeier had forbidden her to cry, she did not say anything to Clara, but suffered in silence. Gradually Heidi started losing her appetite. Chapter 8. During that time, something very strange began happening in the Sisman house. Every morning the front door was found wide open. Everyone was scared. Fräulein Rottenmeier wrote at once to Herr Sisman asking him to come immediately. "We all think that there is a ghost in the house," she wrote. Herr Sisman arrived in haste, though disbelieving the reason stated by Fräulein Rottenmeier. That night he decided to keep watch and catch the ghost. His friend, the doctor, accompanied him. At 1 o'clock, the front door opened, and they saw the culprit. It was Heidi. It was she who opened the door every night. She had been sleepwalking. Heidi was carried to her room by the doctor. She told him, amidst her sobs, "Every night I dream that I'm back with grandfather. I hear the wind rustling the leaves of the fir trees. I open the door to hear it properly, but when I open my eyes, I'm always in Frankfurt." The doctor declared that Heidi was terribly homesick and must be sent home at once. Herr Sisman was shocked. Arrangements were made hastily to send Heidi home with Sebastian. Heidi was overjoyed, but Clara was sad. Herr Sisman promised her that they could go to visit Heidi next summer. Clara packed many gifts for Heidi. Chapter 9. After a long journey, Heidi and Sebastian finally reached the house at the top of the mountain. "Grandfather, I'm back!" cried the little girl as soon as she spotted him sitting outside the cottage. Grandfather was speechless when he saw Heidi. He had given up all hopes of meeting her again. The old man could not speak for a few minutes. For the first time in many years his eyes were filled with tears. Next spring, Clara and her grandmother visited Heidi. Clara was very happy to see her friend. After a few days, grandmother left. Clara, however, stayed back with Heidi and grandfather. The mountain air, grandfather's care, and Heidi's love helped Clara regain her health. With time, Clara began walking again. A month later, Clara's father, Herr Sisman, visited grandfather's house along with his mother. When they saw Clara walking towards them, they could not believe their eyes. They couldn't thank grandfather enough. The days passed in cheerfulness and joy. Soon it was time for Clara and her father and grandmother to return home to Frankfurt. Clara was upset at the thought of leaving behind Heidi and the beautiful mountains, but Heidi reminded her, "Summer will be soon here, and then you can come here again." And soon, with beautiful memories of the mountains, Clara started on her journey home